We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We passed the 6-minute mark in our countdown for Apollo 11, the flight to land of the first men on the moon. We're on time at the present time for our planned liftoff of 32 minutes past the hour. Coming up shortly, that swing arm up at the spacecraft level will come back to its fully retracted position. This should occur at the 5-minute mark in the count. The swing arm now coming back as our countdown continues. Skip Chauvin informing the astronauts that the swing arm now coming back. 4 minutes and counting. We are go for Apollo 11. We'll be coming up in the automatic sequence about 10 or 15 seconds from this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Firing command coming in now. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. 2 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting. Oxidize.
On July 16, 1969, the crew of Apollo 11 prepared for a journey that has been called the greatest single step in human history. A flight to the moon, manned exploration, and a safe return back to Earth. It was 4 in the morning when Mission Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Aldrin Jr. began to suit up for their historic flight. Other astronauts had made this same trip to the launch pad, but never with such worldwide anticipation.
Oxidizer tanks in the second and third stages now have pressurized. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds. The third stage completely pressurized. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. Good luck and Godspeed. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6.
That this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
So let's start with the components of the ship that were discarded one by one until this became this. Here's the rocket that sent the astronauts into space, the Saturn V. The 3 stages of the Saturn V each played a different role in launching Apollo on a path to the moon. We'll get to that later. On top of the rocket is the actual Apollo spacecraft. It's made up of 3 parts too. There's the lunar module, the component that would eventually land on the lunar surface, the service module, which had propulsion systems for course corrections and entering and escaping orbit, and the command module, where our 3 heroes were for most of the mission. And last but not least, this is the launch escape system, which was designed to pull the command module away from the rocket if something went wrong during launch. Together, all these pieces made up the Saturn V rocket and Apollo 11 spacecraft. But it's the way they came apart that made the moon landing happen. The Saturn V's first stage launched Apollo, carrying the spacecraft 42 miles above the Earth and reaching a speed of about 6,000 miles per hour. The first stage then detached, and once the Saturn V's second stage kicked in, the now needless launch escape system jettisoned too. The second stage propelled the spacecraft even farther and faster into space, and after it detached, the third stage of the rocket fired briefly to knock Apollo into a parking orbit, 103 miles above the Earth's surface. Here, final checks were made, and the Saturn V fired again to set Apollo on course to the moon, in a move called the translunar injection. Once the spacecraft propelled away from Earth, the Saturn V's job was done. Now, the astronauts needed to pull off a mid-flight maneuver to reconfigure the ship so the crew could access the lunar module, which had been stored in a protective compartment during launch. To do this, the command service module detached and flipped 180 degrees, docking with the lunar module and extracting it. In the process, they ditched the third, now useless stage of the Saturn rocket. This whole high-stakes launch process only took about 3.5 hours, and this, the completed Apollo spacecraft, was the end result. For the next 3 days, Apollo coasted through space, until it finally reached its target and was pulled into orbit by the moon's gravity. This is where the crew split up. Armstrong and Aldrin transferred to the lunar module, named Eagle, and slowly descended toward the surface, while Collins continued to circle the moon in the command module, called Columbia. Now, here comes another tricky part, landing on the moon. To make this historic moment happen, Eagle turned and used its engine to slow its momentum and ultimately touch down on the lunar surface.
The Eagle has landed.
The moonwalk was broadcast live on television, immortalizing Neil Armstrong's words here.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I think that was Neil's quote. I didn't understand it.
No, one small step for man, but I didn't get the second phrase.
After about 21.5 hours on the moon, Eagle performed the first launch from a celestial body that wasn't Earth, leaving its landing gear behind and timing its ascent with Columbia's path in lunar orbit to rejoin the spacecraft. Once Armstrong and Aldrin transferred back into the command module, the lunar module was no longer needed. Just like before, Apollo needed to break out of orbit. This maneuver was called the trans-Earth injection, and began the 2.5-day journey home. Upon approaching its entry point into Earth's atmosphere and no longer needing its propulsion engines, Apollo jettisoned the service module and prepared for re-entry, protected by the now exposed heat shield on the bottom of the command module.
Apollo blazes across the heavens, coming back to Earth at 25,000 miles an hour.
All flight controllers, go for landing. Retro. Go. Righto. Go. Guidance. Go. Control. Telcom. Go. GNC. Go. Ecom. Go. Surgeon. Go. Capcom, we're go for landing.
Eagle, Houston, you're go for landing, over.
But the landing veers from the planned script. As the LEM nears the surface, the onboard computer flashes an alarm the crew doesn't recognize.
1201. 1201. Roger, 1201 alarm.
Any one of thousands of technical glitches could abort the landing. But Houston quickly diagnoses the problem as non-critical, an overloaded computer.
1201 alarm.
Same type, we're go, flight.
Okay,
we're go. Same type, we're go.
That's when real trouble threatens the mission.
540 feet down at 30 and at 15.
As the LEM pitches upright about a mile above the moon's surface, Armstrong gets his first look at where computers will set them down. A field of boulders, any one of which could prove deadly. Armstrong wraps his hand around the joystick and takes manual control.
3.5 down, 220 feet. 13 forward.
With fuel running out, Armstrong flies the LEM like a helicopter. Aldrin keeps his eye on their altitude, forward speed, and rate of descent, calling out the numbers.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward.
At 60 seconds, we're still 100 feet up. I was nervous. Okay, at 30 seconds, we were 10 feet. I figured we had it made. But 100 feet, we're thereabouts at 60 seconds. You could very easily just not be where you want to be.
4 forward, drift into the right a little.
Sort of like driving your car when the gas gauge is reading empty, but you know that when it gets down there, you got a few more miles left. Well, that was the situation we faced. And I think it was in the last seconds. Everybody was holding their breath. It was pretty dicey.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Mode control, both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in.
We've had shutdown.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Okay, everybody, T1, stand by for T1.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Man on the moon.
Ooh. Oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Like people around the world, of every persuasion and from every walk of life, mission controllers in Houston are overwhelmed.
Okay, keep the chatter down in this room. Now, in the control room, we had work to do because we had to very rapidly look at the spacecraft systems and give the crew a stay-no-stay decision that everything was safe to remain in the moon, and we had to accomplish that within the first 2 minutes. Okay, T1, stay-no-stay, retro. Stay. FIDO. Stay. Guidance. Stay. Control. Stay. Telcom. Stay. GNC. Stay. Ecom. Stay. Surgeon. Stay. Capcom, or stay for T1. So basically, we had to keep our emotions in check and keep the chatter down for the first 2 hours after landing while everybody in the entire world was celebrating.
And we're getting a picture on the TV. You got a good picture, huh?
It's distorted, flickering, and at first, upside down. But a small black and white television camera mounted outside the LEM gives the world its first live glimpse of an alien landscape. No one is more interested in seeing that first picture than the man responsible for bringing it to everyone's TV.
This whole mission was now about television, in my mind. There were hundreds of millions of people watching, waiting to see the first step on the moon and people on the moon, see a spacecraft on the moon, anything. And if it doesn't work, then probably people actually will know my name years from now as the guy who didn't bring you television from the moon.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
The world just marveled at this right along with us, and we more or less made the whole world our partners in this thing by inviting people to be there during the launches. And I think that's one of the best things we ever did in the space program. One of the best decisions ever made with regard to the space program was to share that with the world.
Okay, I just checked. Getting back up to that first step, that isn't collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up.
More than 500 million people around the globe watch as Armstrong first makes sure he can get back into the LEM, then gives the first eyewitness account from the lunar surface.
The surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
6.5 hours after landing on the Sea of Tranquility, Neil Armstrong steps off the footpad of the lunar lander and ends the race to the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For 2 hours and 31 minutes, Armstrong and Aldrin share their observations.
Surface is fine and powdery. I can kick it up loosely with my toe. There seems to be no difficulty in moving around as we suspected. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here. Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
Aldrin says magnificent, but thinks otherwise.
What a desolate place we just landed on. Absolutely no life, no color, really, until you get down and look at the minerals in the rocks, because everything's covered with this little dust.
They are the only two beings here, but Armstrong and Aldrin have come for all humanity.
Here, men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. came in peace for all mankind.
Neil and Buzz, the President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over.
That would be an honor.
Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House. I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you have done. For every American, this has to be the proudest day of our lives. And for people all over the world, I am sure that they too join with Americans in recognizing what an immense feat this is. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. And as you talk to us from the sea of tranquility, it inspires us to redouble our efforts to bring peace and tranquility to earth. For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to earth.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor and privilege for us to be here representing not only the United States, but men of peace of all nations, and with interest and a curiosity and with a vision for the future. Honor for us to be able to participate here today.
And thank you very much, and I look forward, all of us look forward to seeing you on the Hornet on Thursday.
Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. I believe they're setting up the flag now.
At last, after the years of preparation, the launch and the landing, the first two human beings on the moon could simply marvel at this strange environment.
Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
The 2.5-hour moonwalk passed all too quickly. And soon it was time to come home as the pair climbed back inside their spacecraft.
We'd like to say from all of us in all the countries and in the entire world, we think that you've done a magnificent job up there today.
Thank you. Couldn't enjoy it as much as we did. It was great.
And beginning of blackout approximately 17 seconds after entry interface into the atmosphere, 400,000 feet or approximately 85 miles above the Earth.
Hello, America, Houston. Over.
Should be coming out of blackout, and hopefully we will have confirmation from the crew on drogue deployment and main parachute deployment.
America, this is Houston.
I'll follow. Hello, Currie. It's a beautiful day. We're out at 6:10. We got 3 good reads. Outstanding. And all is well on board. All is well on board. Wonderful. There you are.
Cheering going on here in the control center as the splashdown was watched in real time from the recovery helicopter. Best wishes from management, flight controllers, other people who have been associated with the Apollo program.
A brief period in quarantine would be the crew's only respite before an extraordinary madness began. Armstrong, the humble aeronautical engineer and test pilot from small-town Ohio, was about to have his life utterly transformed.
There was thousands and thousands of people, and people from windows above and apartments and so on. It was fabulous. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before in my life or ever had done before in my life. We were in open cars, open convertibles.
I can remember, I'm in the car and I'm waving and I'm like, oh, I didn't do anything. I'm not sure why I'm in here.
The schedule was punishing, with the astronauts forced into the role of international ambassadors. Together with their wives, they visited 23 countries in just 45 days. Their mission now was to shake hands with the world, and everyone was eager to meet the first man on the moon.
We went to each country, and it would be, of course, a huge welcome at the airport, which called for a speech, a huge luncheon or something, which called for a speech, and then there would be the major state dinner, which called for a speech. And I always felt that Neil had the responsibility, the burden, if you will, of always saying the perfect thing. He was the star, but I have to say he had a pretty darn good supporting cast.
This was the beginning.
It's overwhelming to think about how much has come from that inspiration.
If there was something that he could pass along to future generations, I think it would be the conviction to do the right thing.
One thing, he was true to himself. He was the man that you saw. That was him.